The sun was dipping low over a dusty highway, casting a golden glow on the open road. The distant rumble of engines echoed through the air as a group of bikers roared past, leather jackets gleaming and sunglasses reflecting the fading light. Among them was a man known only as Razor, a rough, hot-headed rider with a reputation for settling things with his fists. But today, Razor was about to pick the wrong fight. Parked by the roadside was a familiar face, none other than Clint Eastwood. Calm and cool as ever, Clint was leaning against his vintage car, enjoying the stillness of the evening. He wasn't looking for trouble, but sometimes trouble finds you. Razor, feeling bold in front of his crew, decided to stir things up. Maybe it was the heat, or maybe he just wanted a story to tell later. Whatever the reason, he strutted over to Clint with a cocky grin. Words were exchanged, sharp, tense. Razor pushed his luck, poking fun at Clint's age, his movies, his legacy. And before anyone could blink, Razor threw a punch. The crack of knuckles against skin broke the silence. Clint staggered back, but his eyes, those legendary eyes, held steady. He didn't fight back. He didn't need to. Because standing a few steps away was someone Razor hadn't noticed, Big Shaq. Towering like a mountain, Shaquille O'Neal had been quietly watching it all unfold. And now he stepped forward, his massive frame casting a shadow over Razor. The bikers fell silent. Shaq's hand tightened into a fist the size of a sledgehammer. He wasn't smiling anymore. Razor's smirk faded. He realized, too late, that he'd made the biggest mistake of his life. And what happened next? Well, you're going to want to stick around for that. Razor's heart raced, but he tried not to show it. His crew stood behind him, but none of them were laughing now. They knew who Big Shaq was. Everyone did. You didn't have to follow basketball to understand that the man standing there was a legend, and not someone you wanted to mess with. His size alone was enough to make anyone think twice, but it was his calm, steady stare that made Razor uneasy. There was no anger, no shouting. Just that look, like Shaq had seen this kind of trouble before and knew exactly how to handle it. Clint Eastwood wiped his lip with the back of his hand, his face unreadable. He stayed quiet, like he was giving Razor a chance to walk away. But Razor was stuck, his pride on the line, his friends watching. He couldn't just back down, not after throwing the first punch. So he tried to play it off. He puffed out his chest, muttered something about minding their own business, but his voice cracked just enough for everyone to hear it. Shaq didn't move, but his presence was like a wall, solid, unmoving. He glanced at Clint, as if asking if he was all right, and Clint gave a small nod. No words, but an understanding passed between them. It was like they had known each other for years, though maybe they had only just met. That was the thing about guys like Clint and Shaq. They carried respect wherever they went. The bikers shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't the fight they signed up for. Razor knew it too. But his fists were still clenched, his mind racing, wondering if he could talk his way out, or if he was about to face the hardest hit of his life. And right then, the tension hung so thick, you could cut it with a knife. Razor's eyes darted between Shaq and Clint, his breathing shallow. He felt trapped, like a cornered dog, but he wasn't ready to show weakness. His crew stood nearby, but their silence said everything. This wasn't their fight anymore. They were waiting to see what he would do. The weight of their stares pressed on him. He had started this, but now he was alone in it. Shaq's gaze never wavered. His massive arms hung relaxed, but there was a quiet power in his stance, like he could move in a split second if he needed to. Clint leaned against his car again, wiping his hand across his chin. He wasn't trying to play tough. He didn't have to. His calmness was louder than any threat Razor could have made. A few feet away, a dusty old gas station clerk peered through the window. He had seen plenty of bikers come through over the years, but this was different. He recognized Clint right away. Who wouldn't? And Shaq, well, that was a man you didn't forget. The clerk reached for his phone, not to call the cops, but just in case things got out of hand. He knew how fast things could turn bad on this stretch of road. Razor's mind spun. He thought about his reputation, the stories he had built around himself, being the guy no one messed with. But now, those stories didn't mean much. This wasn't about ego anymore. This was real. One wrong move, and he could be on the ground faster than he could blink. He could feel the eyes of his crew, the clerk, even passing drivers slowing down, sensing something about to break. And as the wind kicked up dust around their boots, Razor realized this wasn't just a fight. It was a moment that could change everything. Razor's fingers twitched, hovering near his side, like he was still deciding if he had one more move left. His chest rose and fell faster now, but he kept his face tight, trying to mask the doubt creeping in. The sun was almost gone, casting long shadows across the highway. Shaq took a slow step forward, not aggressive, just steady, but that one step felt like the ground shifted beneath them. Razor tensed up, his instincts screaming to do something, anything, but his mind knew better. This wasn't a fight he could win. Clint's eyes flicked up, catching the movement, but he stayed leaned back against his car. He crossed his arms like he was watching a slow burn play out. It was that same look from his movies, the one where you knew he was ready for whatever came next, but he wasn't going to be the first to break. That look made Razor feel smaller than he ever had before. Behind Razor, his crew shifted their weight, boots scuffing the gravel. One of them, a younger guy with a nervous grin, whispered something, trying to lighten the mood. It didn't work. The tension was too thick. Another biker took a small step back, but he was already preparing to leave, ready to pretend none of this happened. The gas station clerk stayed frozen inside, his phone in his hand, but his thumb hovering over the screen. Even a passing semi slowed down, the driver peering out, sensing the storm brewing on that quiet stretch of road. Razor's jaw tightened, his pride and fear locking horns. Shaq was now just a few feet away, close enough to feel his presence like heat off an engine. Every second stretched longer than the last, and then, without warning, Shaq's hand shifted, just the smallest motion, but it was enough. Razor flinched, and in that split second, everything hung on what would happen next. Razor's flinch was quick, barely a twitch, but everyone saw it. That tiny crack in his tough exterior spread like wildfire through his crew. They weren't laughing, they weren't backing him up. They were just standing there, watching him slip. And Razor knew it, his stomach knotted. He opened his mouth to say something, to reclaim control, but before he could, the low growl of another engine cut through the tension. A sleek black SUV rolled up slowly, tires crunching over gravel. The windows were tinted, hiding whoever was inside. It didn't belong to the bikers, and it definitely wasn't some lost tourist. It stopped just a few yards away, engine humming like it was waiting for something. Everyone turned, eyes narrowing. Even Clint pushed off his car a little, his calm slipping into something sharper. Shaq's shoulders shifted. He didn't move much, but you could feel his focus harden. The driver's door creaked open. A tall man stepped out, dressed sharp but casual, like someone who had money but knew his way around rough places. His face was tough, with a scar just under his eye. He didn't look like trouble, but he had that quiet confidence, the kind that makes people pay attention. He looked around, taking in the scene, the bikers, Clint, Shaq. Then his eyes settled on Razor. There was recognition there, but not the friendly kind. Razor stiffened. Whatever this was, it was personal. The man didn't raise his voice, but his words carried weight. "Razor, didn't think I'd see you out here." The crew exchanged uneasy glances. Razor's face tightened. This wasn't part of the plan. Whoever this guy was, he knew something. And now the fight Razor was trying to avoid was starting to feel like the least of his problems. Razor's face turned pale, but he tried to hold it together. His eyes stayed locked on the man with the scar, but his mind was racing. He knew this guy, Derek. They had crossed paths years ago, back when Razor was trying to build his name. It hadn't ended well. Razor had skipped out on a deal, and Derek wasn't the type to forget. And now here he was, in the middle of nowhere, like he'd been waiting for this moment. Shaq and Clint didn't move, but you could feel their attention shift. They could sense it. This was bigger than a roadside scuffle now. Razor's crew stepped back even more, creating space like they wanted nothing to do with whatever was about to go down. Razor's pride was gone. Now it was survival. Derek took a slow step forward, his tone calm but firm. "You still owe me, Razor. Thought you could outrun it." Razor swallowed hard. He wanted to deny it, put on that tough face again, but his voice shook when he spoke. "I didn't know you'd come this far." The air grew heavy. Clint shifted slightly, just enough to show he was ready if things got messy. Shaq didn't say a word, but his eyes stayed on Razor. Everyone was waiting. Was this the moment it all exploded? But then, the twist. Derek turned to Clint and gave a small nod. "Appreciate you keeping him here." Razor's heart stopped. Clint had known this whole time. That calm, steady presence wasn't just coincidence. He had been holding Razor in place. Shaq, too. They were part of it. Razor staggered back, realizing he'd never been in control. He thought he was running the show, but the whole time, he was the one being played. Razor stood frozen, his chest tight, as the weight of it all sank in. He wasn't the big shot he thought he was. He was just another guy who had pushed his luck too far. His eyes flicked to his crew, but they didn't look back. They were already inching toward their bikes, eager to distance themselves from whatever came next. Loyalty only went so far when things got real. Clint adjusted his jacket, his face as steady as ever. He wasn't gloating. He didn't need to. This wasn't personal for him. It was just another chapter in a long life of knowing when to step in and when to let things play out. Shaq gave a slight nod to Derek, like two professionals acknowledging a job well done. His massive frame relaxed, but that quiet strength was still there, like a reminder to everyone that he could handle himself if he needed to. Derek let the tension hang for a moment longer before he spoke. "We're not here to break you, Razor, but you know what you owe. It's time to make it right." His tone was firm, but not cruel. This wasn't about humiliation. It was about settling things the way men like Derek did, face to face. Razor finally exhaled, his shoulders slumping. He knew he had no choice. Running had only brought him here, and there was nowhere left to go. He gave a small nod, barely more than a whisper. "I get it." The desert wind picked up, kicking dust over the quiet highway. Clint stepped back toward his car. Shaq walked with that easy, powerful stride to his SUV. Derek turned last, leaving Razor standing alone, watching as the road stretched on into the fading light, his past finally catching up, but his future now his to face.